Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, we'll be going into some of the Shadow Priest changes. Primarily, the change to the Shadow Priest Maldraxxus ability. If you weren't aware, Unholy Nova, the Maldraxxus Shadow Priest, or I guess Priest ability, has gotten an update in order to be a lot easier to use. First of all, it is no longer melee. Yes, it does still have its AoE component. It has a little bit of this targeting damage thing based on how many enemies you hit. It does different damage, so it doesn't overscale out of control. But this ability is so much easier to use, and I actually got to try it in a dungeon. We also had a small change to Shadow Crash to be a little bit more effective, so I want to talk about some of these new updates for Shadow Priest that have happened just recently. So when it comes to Priest, I first of all wanted to try these abilities in a dungeon. So I ran a dungeon to give you guys some of the results and a bit of damage. I have an overall where I even compared against another Priest who went for a more AoE focus, really as a Mongo AoE playstyle as he could in order to, well, I guess maybe test out something. So this is going to be my mostly single target playstyle versus his AoE playstyle, where the only abilities that really do any significant AoE for me are going to be Unholy Nova in the new change to Shadow Crash. Not that much new, more like going old. Let's first talk about Unholy Nova. We'll get to Shadow Crash later. So Unholy Nova got changed quite a bit. This ability now owns, I mean, it's really not bad, and I thought it was a cool ability prior, but this is really cool. So now this ability has yards range to it, a 40-yard range. Even has a bit of an animation. As you can see, it has this green spiral fly at the enemy and infect enemies in AoE. And this damage has a portion of the damage is instant cast. When this Nova reaches the enemy, it will explode in a 15-yard range, afflicting enemies with unholy transfusion, healing allies, and healing allies based on the number of targets. So this has a heal component, this is a damage component. So the heal component is kind of cool. It'll just pull a heal to nearby allies, and it'll do damage over time to enemies. And when you hit those enemies with a dot, it'll also do quite a bit of damage. So the ability itself, as it reads, the damage component is what, 9,000, 8,000 damage. So here it did on a trained dummy about 10,000 damage. That's why I ran over, started attacking it immediately. This ability also has a couple other things that say it deals damage and heals allies based on number of targets. So the more allies are together, the less it heals for. The more enemies, it also has the same component for enemies. The more enemies it affects, the weirder the damage is in numbers. So it doesn't do like proper, everybody gets healed for 2,000. The more allies you end up having really close together, like for example, I have this priest, monk, and another priest nearby, and I'll throw this ability at them. It'll heal them in the tentacle for 1,000. If it healed everybody for a fair 2,000, that would have been a lot of healing. But it does get reduced the more enemies or allies it affects. So this ability will be, I think, pretty good for Priest. It's more of a single target heal, more of like a small group heal. And I do wonder how big is this drop off instead of like a 20-man raid. But with the trained dummies that we have here, there's only so much you can really test. So you saw how much damage it did to the enemy in terms of the damage part, the dot itself. It did about 10k worth of damage to a single enemy. Of course, I did have, I think, a trinket proc maybe, but on average between 9 to 10k damage. In Armory, we have a couple different modifications for our dummies. We have 3 trained dummies sitting together, and then we have 4 trained dummies sitting together. So this can give you a little bit of an idea of kind of like where I think the damage components is going to be. So if you're hitting 3 enemies all at once with this ability with a Nova, they are going to take a bit of damage. The damage is going to be higher than if you were to hit a single target overall, but in terms of how much more damage, the first enemy that got tagged with this dot took about 10k worth of damage. Would have been 9 to 10. Here it did on 3 enemies 18k. So you can kind of start to see this 18 would have been the number that maybe 2 enemies got hit by, but 3 enemies got hit by 18. So it gives you a little bit of like an idea of how this dot works to try to spread the damage. I think what Blizzard was trying to do with this ability is to try to make an ability that's good for single target, that doesn't punish you for AoE, but doesn't scale out of control for AoE. Compared to the rest of the covenant abilities that are available for Priest, one is a big cooldown ability. For Shadow Priest, that would be maybe like a really big commit and 3-minute cooldown, should do a lot of damage. Then you have the fairy one, which doesn't actually increase your damage, but it does give you damage opportunities. And then you have the venthyr one, which is just only single target. So comparing this ability against other abilities, having one that's just pure good for AoE just made it way too good in group situations. And then using this ability on 4 enemies when you're slamming them with a Nova, and I'll keep myself auto-attacking just to make sure the detail number works properly. You can see kind of the damage has a bit more of a drop off. The dot lasts for quite a while. I believe it does scale with haste, however, it could be wrong. I'm not a priest main, so I haven't really done the math for it. But you can see the damage ended up being 18k, so it ended up being the damage on 3 targets and 4 targets about the same, and I believe that would be the same situation if, let's say, it hit 20 targets. There is, however, benefits from this ability, even if it does affect 20 targets but doesn't do more damage. Every enemy that you hit while in Holy Transfusions on them does apply a heal. So for healers, for Shadow Priests that want some off healing for the group, Holy Priests, that still can scale, and I think that number doesn't change no matter how many enemies you affect. So if you're affecting, let's say, for some reason you are, let's say, doing a massive pull, and you're playing with a bunch of classes that don't have cap on AoE, like a Affliction Warlock, you drop down a Holy Transfusion to get a Corruption up and running on everybody, and Holy Transfusion pops, and every Corruption ticks, that Warlock is basically healing themselves. So there's some crazy things you can maybe do with it. Another ability that could change for priests is Shadow Crash. This ability now no longer has charges, just a 30-second cooldown. It has a lot more damage now. It generates 20 sanity, so it'll do damage to all targets. So this ability doesn't have any caps on AoE. It flies in kind of quick, and it does a good burst of damage to everybody. It generates 20 sanity, so it's really easy to use. This ability, I think, is designed to be more of burst AoE in the role of cleave, in the role of potential cleave with Suspicious Spirits, and then Shadow Crash is doing burst to enemies, but also would be really good in a purely mobile situation. And I think this is probably the better decision, because the current version that you have on live version of Shadow Crash with 3 charges, I don't know how many people are really playing it. It doesn't seem like they're all that good. It seemed interesting in terms of the play, but it was just weird. It's too weird to the point where you don't really know if it's something you would actually want to use, just because it's kind of awkward to play around, I guess is the best way to put it. So I'm glad they reverted Shadow Crash and they just gave it a little bit more of an umph. Super happy to see the Unholy Nova change, and playing with both of those abilities felt quite good inside of dungeons. I like how Unholy Nova has this cleave but single target potential. Just kind of makes you not worry about that aspect of how to use that ability properly or which targets to target with Unholy Nova. It does have a little bit of a travel time to it from 40 yards, so it is going to be a little bit weird maybe in PvP for this ability when it reaches. Maybe if, let's say, the tank moves the whatever target you're targeting with this ability away from the group or whatever. But as long as you're able to plan your fights, I think, accordingly, I think this ability is still going to have a massive impact, and it seems to be quite easy to use. I like it. I like this change to Unholy Nova. I think this is far better than the AoE version that it had from your position, but it also has some interesting aspects of healing and damage and based on number of targets thing. I think it's going to hopefully make the Maldraxxus Covenant for Shadow Priest just a little bit better. It really wasn't bad to play with, and definitely one of my considerations going forward when it comes to playing Priest going into the next expansion. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about the Priest update, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.